Okay, so I get a lot of questions about my streaming setup. It's kind of complicated, and I thought it might be useful to make a short video here to kind of explain how I have it set up. And so this is primarily for my Twitch streaming setup. I don't really stream on YouTube right now, and I can explain how I do the YouTube recordings as well. But basically, I've got. You can look at the diagram here. It might be helpful if I turn my camera off here for a second. I've got a 2 PC setup, and so I've got my gaming PC, which is kind of the thing that I play games on and do most of my other stuff on. And then I have a Mac as well, which is a Mac Studio that I use for like software development work, but also doubles as an encoding machine. And so I basically run OBS on both of them, and I do all the encoding and piping of video to Twitch from my Mac. And really, the Mac is kind of like the main OBS machine. And so it has, all of my clips are set up as media sources in there, all of my different scenes. My cameras are all plugged into the Mac. None of that stuff goes into the PC. And really, the PC does a couple of things. One, it obviously has the game or whatever it is that I'm streaming, kind of source video. It has my main microphone, and it has my monitor headphones. And then it also runs what's called NDI video, which is basically a way to stream video over the network effectively. And OBS has plugins that support NDI in and out. So you can effectively create virtual video cables over the network using the NDI plugin. And so basically OBS captures all of my game output, sends it over NDI to OBS on my Mac, which then adds in the overlays, mixes in audio, and kind of does all the standard stuff you do with OBS, and then streams it out to Twitch. And so I'll get into some of the other details, but a lot of people may wonder, and I do get this question quite a bit, which is, why do it that way? Why use NDI if you're effectively just encoding it twice? And so the answer is that the NDI encoding is really like low overhead versus the encoding that I have to do to Twitch, especially if you have enhanced broadcasting on, or if you're encoding multiple streams, and all that stuff. And so NDI is like fairly low overhead. It's really just capturing the raw video out, sending it over the network to the OBS on my Mac, which can then do things like downscaling it, because I have an ultra wide resolution, but my internet connection is not the greatest, so I don't want to stream to Twitch at the full resolution of my screen, because the bit rate would probably be too much for my internet connection on a consistent basis. Like, my internet connection is kind of spiky, and so if I was streaming at 3440 by 1440, at a reasonable bit rate, I'd probably be pegging it and running into stability issues. I'm on Starlink, and it works really well for me, given that I'm kind of out in the middle of nowhere and don't have any better options. Do 1719 by 1720, and so basically I'm downscaling to 720p on the Mac, so that I can stream at a reasonable bit rate for that resolution, and get decent quality bit rate without killing my internet connection. And the reason I started doing that, I mean, one, I already had the Mac, because I like I said, I use the Mac for software development work, so I already have it. And when I'm streaming, I'm not using it for software development work, so it's just sitting there. But moving all of that stuff off of it greatly improved, my FPS game performance. Like, I primarily play Fortnite, but also play Minecraft Arc Raiders and some other games. But Fortnite is really the game I'm mainly concerned about for with regards to frames per second, and doing all this other stuff. I originally only streamed on my PC, and doing all this other stuff on my PC while playing Fortnite. I mean, it was definitely playable, but it definitely cut down. I think when I first did this, I immediately saw like a jump that was averaging anywhere from 60 to 100 FPS by just getting this off of my PC and onto the Mac. And then I still have a few other things, streaming related things I run on the PC because they only run on Windows. And so that's Streamer.bot, which handles a lot of my Twitch automation and orchestration, like alerts for redeems and all that kind of stuff, and SpeakerBot, which handles my text to speech. There are some other options to. I could move StreamerBot to Firebot, which is a very similar software solution. And Firebot runs on Mac. It also runs on Windows, Mac, and Linux. And so I could potentially migrate to Firebot to get StreamerBot off of my PC. But I decided that that was something I didn't want to do right now because there's just so much configuration in StreamerBot. Like I built an AI chatbot that's in here. Like there's tons of stuff. I've just done a lot of customization in StreamerBot and actually have like some custom C# extensions in there. And I just didn't feel like taking on the task of moving that all over to Firebot just so I could get it off the PC. And it's fairly low overhead. SpeakerBot, as I mentioned, is text to speech. So like in my Twitch chat, I have a say command, and so people can just text to speech whenever they want. And then of course I got my Stream Deck. I actually have two Stream Decks, so I can do a quick. We can maybe kind of switch over to show you kind of a quick picture of the setup here. So let me zoom down here. So as you can see, I've got like on my desk here, I've got my keyboard, I've got mice. This is a keyboard for my gaming PC. It's a keyboard for the Mac and the mouse for the Mac. And then I've got two Stream Decks. And this is my USB switch hub. It's got basically a USB hub with toggle switches on it, so I can turn all those ports off and on when I want. But the Stream Decks, one of them is hooked up to the PC, which is this one, and then this one is hooked up to the Mac. Actually, it's the other way around. This one is hooked up to the Mac, and that is the Stream Deck. I think it's the XL, and then this is the I don't remember what model this one is, but it's kind of a fancier model that has audio, has programmable knobs and a little LED display here that can. For the knobs that can basically kind of look on here. I've got a Voicemeeter channel that I can adjust the gain on, and you can see what it's set to on that display. And so basically the Stream Deck, one goes into the PC, one goes into the Mac, but I can control really anything from either of them. And then all of this, to monitor all of this, I have some monitoring, which is basically on my home server. I have some open source software. The two pieces of software that I use primarily are called Prometheus and Grafana, and they allow me to track metrics. And so here is basically like the dashboard that I use and for capturing the metrics from my streaming gear so that I can monitor it. So like at the top here, I've got my Starlink internet, and that kind of shows me just overall bandwidth and throughput, what the average latency or ping is, and then what the packet drop rate is. And as you can see with Starlink, there is, like some packet drop. It's usually pretty brief. I honestly don't notice it all that much. I wonder if we go look at like the past 24 hours, you can see that it's really not terrible. In fact, I can actually go like zoom in on this graph alone. Like that's basically like, I think this would be probably like P95 packet drop rate over the past 24 hours. Not too bad. And really the main thing is just like the stability compared to other options I have around here. Like the connection is usually very stable. Very rarely get like complete disconnection, and bandwidth, the bandwidth that I get out of it is reasonable. And then I've got, I'll collapse that guy. For OBS, I've got basically monitoring of OBS on both my Mac and PC, so I can see what's going on here. As you can see right now, I'm recording this on my Mac. I'm streaming my PC screen to the Mac and recording it on the Mac. So Mac record is on, but PC record is off because I'm not actually recording anything on the PC. I'm just sending over the video and the mic audio as well. And then if either one of these were streaming, then you'd see this as on. And so this is just kind of like a quick sanity check. You can see basically for OBS how much CPU it's using. This one is my PC OBS. This one is my Mac OBS. And then you can see also drop frames. So if I start to get any sort of weird issue, then I can look at here and see how many frames I'm dropping. And interestingly enough, right now, like CPU utilization is kind of spiking up more than I expected on my Mac. I'm not entirely sure why. And then, so yeah, looking at frame rate, overall frame rate, this should be right around 60 FPS, but it does kind of vary from time to time, depending on, a variety of factors. Primarily, is the computer doing anything else? What's the CPU usage? So you can kind of see frames were starting to drop. And then memory utilization, I can see basically on both of them how much memory is being utilized over time. Like I can zoom into like the last 5 minutes here and just look at the last 5 minutes. I can also look at like the disk IO. And then let me go back to 7 days. And so that is the dashboard. And this is pretty useful, for one, if I had a stream where something went wrong, I can just go back and look and see what happened and try to kind of figure out, what was going on. And so you can, and then the other thing is that when I'm, in the middle of a stream, I can always pull this up and look at it. The most common one I'm going to go look at is the internet graph here, where I pull the metrics out of my Starlink router and pump them into this database, because if the stream is acting wonky, I want to go see like, okay, like what's the packet drop rate, in the last 15 minutes. And I can see that, and if I see some spikes here, then I know that that's probably why my stream is going wonky. But if I don't see that, then there could be something else going wrong. Yeah, so in a nutshell, that is that is basically how it works. I think there's a couple of other interesting things here on the audio front. So I use a Shure MV6 USB mic. Nothing, it's a nice mic, but it's not like a super fancy production quality mic. And then on the PC, I run NVIDIA Broadcast for the noise reduction. And this does actually impact my game FPS a little bit as well, because it's using the GPU. But I only use the noise reduction, which has a smaller impact. If I were to use, they have like a studio quality sound option. And if I were to use that, that would really impact it. And so I can't use that option. And there isn't really an equivalent free option on the Mac to get the NVIDIA Broadcast studio quality sound, at least not that I've found. So I stick with the noise reduction. The NVIDIA Broadcast noise reduction just has worked really, really well for me, and I've tried to replicate it in OBS, and it's just never quite as good. OBS is good. I mean, like you can do good noise reduction in there, but I've felt like NVIDIA Broadcast is superior. And when you're streaming, your quality of your sound is important. So I'm willing to take a small FPS hit for that, especially after moving all this other stuff off. And then Voicemeeter Banana is basically my Voicemeeter's virtual audio mixing software. And so that allows me to create all sorts of, virtual cables, plug stuff in together in certain ways. And as an example, I have, all of the, like if someone has a channel point redeem, if there's a media clip playing, that all happens on the Mac, but my headphones are actually on the PC. And so I don't hear those sounds. Well, I do hear the sounds, but if I wasn't doing something special, then I wouldn't hear those sounds. So if someone redeemed something or used TTS, it wouldn't show up. Actually, TTS would, but if someone did a channel point redeem that plays a media clip, it plays on the Mac in OBS. And so I actually have to pipe that back out to the PC with an audio cable. So I actually have like a line in on going from the, on my PC, and that has an audio cable coming from the Mac. And then I mix that in with Voicemeeter Banana. And that's actually, I have a little dial on my Stream Deck that I showed you earlier right here. And that's what allows me to adjust the volume of the sound coming from the Mac into my monitor headphones, which are on the more kind of like drill down diagrams. The Stream Deck one is kind of interesting because if you have multiple PCs, Stream Deck actually has a multi-OBS plugin. And so like on here on my Mac, I've got the multi-OBS plugin. And so from my Mac, I can control OBS and on my PC and my Mac at the same time. And so I have like multi-step buttons where, if I'm going to go into my game scene for Fortnite, it's basically going to turn on this one button will turn on game capture for OBS on my PC and set up the Fortnite overlay, whatever overlays or specific configurations I have for OBS on my Mac, and do that all in one click. orchestrating multiple OBS instances. So super, super useful. And then the monitoring for the graphs and stuff like we saw here, that uses, I have agents that run on each of these, my Mac and PC, and they basically they generate these statistics about what the computer is doing, what OBS is doing. I harvest those out into a Prometheus database. It's a type of metrics database. And then set up the graphs in Grafana, which is this program that you're looking at here. For chat orchestration and stuff, Streamer.bot I think is pretty. If you know anything about Streamer.bot, or if you're streaming on Twitch, you've probably heard of it. It's basically just stream orchestrator that you run on your PC that allows you to set up actions when things happen, and basically kind of create workflows for your stream. So if you want to play an audio. And so those, like I said, Streamer.bot and Speaker.bot, the TTS system, run on my PC, but I pipe the audio from that into the Mac as well. And then here's a little bit of a drill down on the audio setup. And so these should be fairly accurate. I did basically, to full disclosure, these graphs or these diagrams were generated with AI using Claude, but what I did was basically document my whole setup and then put that into Claude and asked it to generate the diagrams for me, which is actually a very useful application for Claude. If you can describe something and say what's plugged into what, and kind of just talk, and you don't even really have to have it that organized, like you can just kind of barf it all in there, and then Claude can make a diagram for you, or I'm sure ChatGPT can do the same thing, any of the kind of major LLMs. But yeah, anyways, I hope that was useful. If you have any questions, drop them in the comments, and I am happy to try and answer them if I can. Always, got limited time, but I'm always trying to help folks get their streaming setup working better. I don't necessarily suggest that anybody does something quite this complicated unless you are more of a tech person. I enjoy doing this, and so the complexity, for me is worth it because I'm just used to doing this stuff, and so troubleshooting it if something goes wrong isn't too much of a pain. But if you're primarily a streamer and not a tech person, then you probably want to keep it as simple as possible, because there's nothing more frustrating than your stream not working. Yeah, that's it. Modpack Dad out. I'll talk to you all later. Bye.